So this first lecture is actually going to kind of go over how calcium levels are maintained in the body, as well as a little bit on phosphorus and magnesium, but calcium is the main driver. And why it's the main driver is because it's essential for so many things in the body, including contraction of muscle, nerve conduction, certainly clotting of blood, which we've talked about before, skeletal integrity, release of certain hormones. And then when we have abnormalities in calcium, whether it's really high calcium or low calcium, we can see clinical conditions associated with that. I'm sorry, the cat is meowing. He is not happy about discussing calcium. Anyway, so this first lecture is going to really talk about the control of that, and that's through parathyroid hormone and calcitonin hormones, and then the vitamin D. And so let's start with PTH, which is parathyroid hormone, which I'm sure you all know that. And PTH, of course, is made by the parathyroid gland, and that's pair glands that are near the thyroid, hence the name, and it's the chief cells that are actually making parathyroid hormone. And PTH's main, and this is what I expect you to actually remember, main job is to increase calcium levels, but it actually decreases phosphorus. And what stimulates PTH is ionized calcium concentration. So the stimulus for PTH is ionized calcium levels. That is the main driver telling PTH to increase or decrease, or to be excreted, or to be secreted or not be secreted. So the next thing we're going to talk about is vitamin D, which is not a hormone. And of course, there's many types of vitamin D, and vitamin D works to increase both. So it increases calcium and it increases phosphorus. And of course, the drivers of vitamin D are a variety of things and the sources of it. So we get vitamin D from our diet. Certain plants contain vitamin D2, while other things in the diet are vitamin D3. Certainly cholesterol via UV light is a source of vitamin D, and that's specifically cholecalciferol. Vitamin D is not always active, so it requires renal activation to actually make it active in all species except for the horse. And the stimulants for vitamin D include calcium levels as well. So calcium levels are going to, and that's ionized calcium, is actually going to determine or kind of tell the body how to control vitamin D. And so it will do that both directly through the kidney and via PTH. All right, the last thing is calcitonin. And calcitonin is fantastic because you just have to remember its name and it tells you what it does. And so calcitonin works to tone everything down. So it decreases calcium and it decreases phosphorus. And calcitonin is made by the parafollicular cells, or the C cells of the thyroid gland. We don't talk about calcitonin that much other than it works in here. One thing I haven't really mentioned yet is magnesium, and that's because we care about magnesium, but not as much as calcium and not as much as phosphorus. But magnesium overlaps kind of in both of these, and in this case, magnesium increases similar to calcium under the effects of PTH and under the effects of vitamin D. So it is going to increase. The next thing we're going to talk about is how these three things, PTH, vitamin D, and calcitonin, work in the body, but not really specifics. So I'm never going to ask you exactly how vitamin D works on the GI versus the kidney. What I do expect you to remember, though, are these three things: that PTH increases calcium and decreases phosphorus, and it also increases magnesium a little bit, but that's not as important. Vitamin D increases calcium and phosphorus, and calcitonin decreases them both. Remember, it tones them both down. But they each work on kind of three areas: the GI, the kidney, and the bone. And they work in those areas like we just said. So I have this on here just to go over it, because when we talk about diseases, hopefully this will make a little bit more sense. So for example, vitamin D, which increases calcium and phosphorus blood levels, it does it by causing reabsorption of calcium and phosphorus in the GI tract. PTH does something similar, but it only works on calcium. And so it increases calcium reabsorption in the GI tract. That's this one here. Now the kidney's a little bit different, of course, because remember that the kidney can activate vitamin D normally, and so vitamin D is going to, in itself, increase calcium reabsorption, but PTH is going to actually make that even better because it's going to activate more vitamin D, and of course that increases calcium. But remember that PTH decreases phosphorus. So how does it do that? Well, it causes more reabsorption of calcium, meaning you pee out less, and vitamin D does something similar, where calcitonin, which decreases both, it causes you to pee out more. And the bone's a little bit different. Remember, bone's a big place where we store calcium and phosphorus. So PTH is going to take out more calcium from the bone, so it's going to make calcium leave the bone, and that's true for vitamin D as well. So an animal who's got vitamin D toxicosis is going to pull tons of calcium and phosphorus out of the bone, hence why we see a marked hypercalcemia and hyperphosphatemia with vitamin D toxicity. Now calcitonin works a little bit indirectly in that it inhibits that right there, so it stops the PTH. Again, what's important for you to realize is that PTH, vitamin D, and calcitonin work differently, and they work on the GI, kidney, and bone, either by increasing reabsorption in the GI tract, increasing reabsorption in the kidney, or causing excretion by the kidney, and then in the bone, pulling calcium and phosphorus out of the bone, or inhibiting them from being pulled out of the bone. And my final reminder is you do not have to memorize how each of these work specifically on an organ. You just have to know their net effects. When we talk about toxicities and when we talk about diseases, it'll be important to realize how the kidney works in terms of vitamin D activation and how vitamin D can be a toxin and why diseases of the parathyroid gland affect calcium and phosphorus.